Welcome, welcome. I wanted to start this episode off by thanking Jeff and RJ for making it out to the last podcast. It was actually a great change of pace, a great treat for me to be able to do an episode with them because they're close friends of mine, and to be able to have that sit down, have that conversation, have them be a part of something I'm creating was a super awesome thing. And I just wanted to give them extra shout out. If you're interested in checking out that episode, check out the playlist, the playlist link in the description below, and go look for that episode, the one right before this. It's episode number 3 with Jeff and RJ, and go find their links, go follow them, get more of them in your life. But today I was cleaning my room, doing some cleaning that just I had neglected, that needed to be done, that hadn't been done, that had just been being put off and put off and put off, and had been easy to put off throughout the entire span of COVID. They've just been... there's been endless reasons, endless amount of time to just be able to say, oh, I'm going to be able to do that later. I'm going to be able to do that tomorrow. Oh, I'll have, I've gotten, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 10 months free probably, or whatever the long-term COVID pandemic results are. And so I'm thinking about different things, but one of the things I'm thinking about is how am I going to open up the podcast to talk about more things than just COVID, to talk about more things than just what's going on in terms of how the pandemic affects life. Because eventually, at some point in time, either this is going to be the new normal and it's not going to be this novel thing to talk about, or it's going to go away and this just talking about the pandemic is going to end as well. So I need to think about different ways to include other aspects of my life into this conversation. And so one thing that I've been thinking about is what's really been missing in my life, and especially during this COVID period of time, and that's been exercise for me. Specifically cycling. Cycling has been my thing now for at least 6 years or so, maybe 5 years if we're talking about when I've actually been good at it. And or I guess so 5 years of activity, but I guess now that I'm thinking about it, 6 years ago. So starting 6 years ago for the past 5 years, it had been, my biggest identity. My dog's name is Velo, which means bike in French. And so it's more than, I'd say, just a hobby for me. It's more than just something that I like, the professional sport that I enjoyed paying attention to. It's more than just an activity I like to do on the weekend. And there was a certain aspect of my life that was completed, a certain aspect of life that was, just having that physical outlet, especially it being physical, was so much. I would even talk about, how important that is to have that type of outlet. And I would even, mention it, so I'm just so glad to have the outlet, even if I'm not racing. And I never realized truthfully how important that was, or what it looked like to not have that in your life, what it looks like to not have that outlet, even though I would say how important it was, but not actually experiencing truthfully how important that was. And so really what happened was something I didn't talk about for a while because I had a lawyer that just said, don't talk about that. We don't need more than, we don't need several stories floating around out there. So I was hit by a car, and so I just didn't talk about it for a while. And now it's at the point where I probably should talk about it for my mental health. It's probably something that would be positive for me to speak about, but it's now something I don't want to talk about. And so speaking about it is kind of hard, but so I was hit by a car, and at that point in time, I was as a pedestrian. At that point in time, I didn't want to be a slow moving thing on the side of the road, and it wasn't cycling related either. And so I just didn't want to be on the road. I'd spent so much of my life even focusing on roads, photographing roads for my BFA project. This was before my thesis, but it's what eventually led to my thesis work. It was work that led to that work. So I was doing that work all about roads, and it had a lot to do with cycling. And even at one point in a portfolio review, a group of professors reviewing my work, and one of them asked, what happens if cycling is no longer a part of your life? What happens if you have some sort of injury? What happens if something happens and it's no longer something that you get to do? And my answer to that was, well, in some way, shape, or form, it's always going to be a part of my life. There's always going to be something that makes it a part of my life. Or if not, I will find another focus for my artwork. If it's no longer the biggest thing in my life, my art will reflect that, and it will reflect what is the most big, important thing in my life. And I didn't estimate what that transition would look like or what it would be, and I don't even know what it is now. But I lost that ability, so to say, to be all about bikes, to have bikes be my main thing. That was like the exact conversation I had. It's come to reality, and it's interesting calling my dog Velo and not being on a bike regularly. It's interesting that part of my life now being gone and it not being like I thought it would be. It's not like there's still involvement that I have outside of that. And so and I'm not even really interested in pro cycling. I'm not interested in catching any pro races. I'm not really affected. I don't really care. I haven't spent really any time. That the race season, the cycling season has basically come to a halt. Probably won't even happen this year. They scheduled the Tour de France which should be completing right about now. They rescheduled it for August, and let's be honest, I don't think Europe's going to be back to having the peloton, a group of 100 riders, all shoulder to shoulder, wheel to wheel, for 6 hours a day. I don't think that that's going to be something that's going to be happening anywhere in the world come then. So I'm just not. I just don't have this interest anymore. As well, which was the big driving force, obviously, right? The racing, and wanting to race, aspiring to get higher levels of racing, and since that's been taken from me, my physical health has been heavily dependent on that, and for a while I've been able to dodge the ups and downs of weight gain. I guess I'm one of the people. I don't just look the same. I don't just have the same body forever. I know there's some people that just, this is their body, that's what they look like forever, even if it's something that they work to maintain, or even if it's something that just happens naturally to them. I'm not one of those people. For my whole life, I've had skinny phases, I've had chunky phases, I've had regular phases. I've gone back and forth all through them in different orders, and so I'm used to fluctuation on my body, like small amounts of fluctuation. In between, this 20, 30 pound window or whatever it is of fluctuation. So I'm used to that. And right now I'm in one of those, and coinciding with not having a physical outlet, not having any other, social outlets that we're used to having due to the pandemic. And so going from that, I think it's finally catching its toll on me, not having a physical outlet. And the honeymoon period of COVID, of the social distance, the COVID isolation, is hit me. I think it's now, because for me, this lifestyle is amazing. It's great, and I still prefer it. However, it's at that point where the little quirks, the little problems aren't like cute, funny, oh, ha 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 kind of moments. They're frustrating. They can get to you. They can get to me now at this point. And so that honeymoon phase is over. And now it's to the point where I really need to start dialing things in. I really need to start the period of this being short and temporary is kind of over. And I need to plan accordingly. I need to plan to buckle into this new world, or this new temporary world of what will be COVID life, I guess. And so working on that, currently one of the things that I need is structure. I need better exercise. I need that outlet back. I need to eat better food. I've spent the last, the last 2 days, I've eaten mostly chips. I think chips have been the majority percentage of my diet for the last 2 or 3 days. And I'm getting to that point where my body is just okay, dude, we're done with the chips. We're good on chips. Thank you. Pass on the chips. We're good here. And we're starting to reject chips. And my body could just feel eating junk food now, basically for the last 2 days, and it's like, okay, stop it, we want something else. And I need to feel better. I need to fuel and eat better. But beyond that, it really just comes down to having more structure. If I had more structure, I would I think a lot of these problems would be negated. So one of the things that I did was I sat down and made a schedule of things that I asked myself, if I could do anything I wanted, what would it be? What would those activities be? And I made the list of those things, and it's here really, in at least for where I'm sitting at this pandemic, we really have the opportunity to do the thing that is whatever we want to do, because the number one reason I think people would say, oh, I can't do that now, oh, I can't, that's not for me, oh, I can't do that, is because the number one reason they would say is, I don't have time, I can't do it now. And that excuse is gone. People don't get people they're forced to have the time now. You can only spend so many hours a day looking for jobs that don't exist. You can only spend so many hours a day doing things if you need to do nothing in order to save as much money as possible. And so being at that point in the pandemic, in life, I'm having that opportunity where I can do the things that I can do, whatever I want to do, and I could make an attempt at doing whatever it is that I want to do professionally, that I thought would be a long shot, or that I thought I wouldn't have the time to really pull it off. Because in looking at my position, I've had to face it. There's no possibility of me going back to a normal life anytime soon, just because I'm going to have to re-enter the workforce at this entry level, basically. And as a recent graduate who got fired right as the COVID pandemic, right after graduation, I'm going to be entering right at the bottom, and they're not going to be entering, or are going to be opening the doors to the bottom until everything up top is taken care of first. And so I think for me, it's come to the point where it's like, okay, I have a while. What is it that I want to do? Write it down, start doing it. And I think that that's one of the things that I've lacked, is the structure of write it down, the structure of start doing it. And so I've made myself a schedule. I've made certain days for certain times, or for certain activities, and it's going to be something that I hold myself to, and I'll use this podcast to hold myself to it. I'll use it to talk about those things that I've been doing, and whether or not I'm keeping into the schedule. But it's easy. I picked one thing for a few specific hours a day that I need to do, and it's things that I want to do. It's things that I want to get done, and I feel like this is going to be helpful. It's this bit of structure that I've been missing, that just really, I think, puts the lock on everything for the rest of the day. And I'm kind of nervous. I'm kind of nervous about getting back to it, because one of the things that I put down is, getting back to art, getting back to photography, getting back to bookmaking, printmaking, getting back to being pretty much an artist. And I'm nervous about it. I'm nervous about sucking. I'm nervous I'm going to get back, start making things that are going to be awful. Because truthfully, they're going to be awful. At this point, there's been enough time off, enough time not making things, enough time from graduation to focusing on, I went from graduation to being kept by a car, to focusing on, that, to focusing on getting a job, landing a job, having a job, as starting that as starting my life, and then going from there to the COVID pandemic. I've stopped focusing on making things, which was my whole focus for 4 years, in in the art program in college. And so I've made some structured time to get back into that, and I'm going to come into that now essentially brand new and fresh again. And so, and outside of the safety net that is the academic scene. And so I'm nervous that I'm gonna suck, and it's gonna be discouraging. But yeah, it's just something I think I'm just gonna have to continue to work through, continue to fight through, and I think it will end up not being too big of a deal. I think it'll prove to be more of something to be afraid of, less to be something of reality. But that's what I've been thinking about recently. It's a lot of just getting down, having structure, and doing things that you want to do, that you need to do, that you know you can do, that are easy enough to actually do, and that they're feasible. Having feasible goals are important, and uh, I think that's going to fill this pandemic lull that I think I haven't addressed. And I think the biggest reason is because I hadn't felt it until recently, and I wasn't able to express it until very recently. I think I wasn't able to point to it, identify it, and start taking the steps to fix it until, maybe even tonight, maybe even today, maybe, even the past few days. If I've known something has been up, and I've known I had a shit diet, and I've known now for a couple of weeks that I've been needing to get back into some form of exercise. So it's been putting a lot of pieces, a lot of parts that I knew were there, and examining them, noticing them, acknowledging them, and putting them together. And so that's what I'm at. That's what I'm going to be doing and thinking about for this coming week. I'm curious to see what other people have been thinking about and have been lacking specifically with the new COVID lifestyle, and if that's something that they've noticed that they're intentionally trying to fix, or if they're doing the waiting game like I did for a while. It seems like that was going to work. And I feel like, for depending on what your situation is, it does work. For some people, it certainly does work. Like people who are waiting to go back to work, like you're just waiting to go back, right? It's not your call. But that's where I'm at. I thank you guys for tuning in. We're getting to the point here where this is getting ready to turn into more of a podcast and less of a YouTube video podcast experiment. And so thank you guys for the interest. Thank you guys for listening. And we'll see you in the next one.